Hello, everyone. I'm Brooks Rayford, CEO of the North Carolina Technology Association, or NC Tech. Welcome to this special virtual session, which has two components. And before I go any further, I should let you know that I've had a bit of technical difficulty this morning staying online. So I've got my phone also hooked into this call. If you see me drop, give me a second. I'll be right back on with my phone, and you just won't be able to see me necessarily. First, today we are releasing the 2023 Tech Innovation Index, which compares just over 100 metropolitan areas across the U.S. and ranks them in various categories that together paint a picture of these metros' strength in tech and innovation. The head of the firm that conducts this research will offer a briefing on the highlights and take your questions if you have any. Then we will pivot to a panel of public and private sector leaders who will discuss the impact of the tech sector on North Carolina, as well as the types of things that in turn impact the tech sector itself. Please note that we're recording this session, and also you may submit questions for our speaker and panelists using the Q&A button on your screen. Please do not use chat for questions. We won't be monitoring it for that. Rather, we encourage you to use chat to introduce yourself or to comment on what you're hearing or to alert our team if you're having any technical difficulties. To kick things off, I'm very pleased to introduce Ted Abernathy, the managing partner of Economic Leadership. His firm specializes in working with public and private clients, analyzing competitiveness, developing strategy, supporting leadership, and reimagining the future. His public clients include communities, states, and regions in the U.S. and abroad. And for many of NC Tech's 30 years, his firm has partnered with us on various projects and reports. The most prominent of these projects is the annual North Carolina State of Technology Industry Report, which is a mouthful, so we call it NC STIR. It's released early in each year. It compares and ranks all of the states on their tech ecosystem. The 2024 report will be released on February 2nd as part of our annual Outlook for Tech conference in Charlotte, which is our statewide kickoff event early in each year. You can find out more about that session at nctech.org/outlook. So Ted, we're glad to have you with us, and I'll turn it over to you to explain a bit about the Tech Innovation Index and share its key findings. A reminder to our live audience to use the Q&A button to submit any questions for Ted and the chat button to comment or introduce yourself. Ted, thanks for being with us.
It's nice to be with you. I'm going to need to share my screen, Alex, so if you'll allow me to do that. And it's fun. This year, we're going to be releasing our 10th annual State of Technology, Brooks. So it's going to be an exciting year for that. We've not had 10 years of any project at our firm, so this is our first one doing this. Today, most of the work you're going to see is the work of Skylar Casey. He's our research director. He's in Salt Lake City, so an early morning, and I happen to be in Denver this morning. So Brooks, good morning to you. Coffee is flowing here today, to let you know. Good morning, everybody. When we start this every year, we want to make sure that we are doing it in the context of the economy that we have in America. And so I tend to do a lot of economic reviews, and so we're going to do a little bit of an economic reset. We're normalizing our economy. We lost 22 million jobs in the pandemic start in the spring of 2020. In 2 years, we had replaced all those jobs, and the economy was red hot. And so the Federal Reserve, as many of you know, started raising rates and has raised rates 11 times over the last 16, 17 months. It has slowed down job growth, but as you read in the papers quite often, the job growth continues really fast in America. During the course of that buildup, when we were adding jobs back, we're adding lots of tech jobs, and the tech sector has had some ups and downs since then, but it's still been pretty strong. In that context, North Carolina has been one of the real states that are outstanding. We're the 6th fastest growing state. Our job numbers have grown 6.9%. That's close to 3 times the national average. Only trails 5 other states, and so it's been a real strong time for the state. People say sometimes, Ted, you say renormalizing, nothing feels normal. So here's the normalization chart for you. This is American spending and American income, and this goes back 10 years. And as you can see, most Americans spend what they make. The charts look pretty close. This is what happens during a pandemic. So first we stop spending because we're all sent home and everything closes up. Then government checks are the red lines, the big red bulges. They start going in and we spend everything. We go out and we buy new computers and new generators and that crazy KitchenAid thing you've never had before. And it has taken us almost 3 more years to get back to a normalization of spending and earnings. And the American economy is 68% driven by your expenditures. So this is what renormalization starts to look like. During the period of the pandemic, we accumulated a lot of savings, almost $2.1 trillion of excess savings. About the end of this month, beginning of next month, we'll have exhausted that. And so the spending amounts in America should be renormalized because we're out of all that excess money. Consumer prices continue to stay high, but the forecast for next year is down in the 2.5% range. The prices have been coming down. The Fed would like it to get it to 2, so interest rates are likely to stay high, but there is even a renormalization of the consumer price index. And we've got everybody back to work again. In fact, the labor force is higher than it's ever been. People are finding jobs. A lot of those are in the tech sector. So what we're seeing for next year is a slowdown because the excess savings is gone. Interest rates are going to stay high. We still have the problems with energy, with OPEC cutting production, and bank lending is tightening. So overall, you expect next year to be more normal, but a very slow year. Will it tip into a recession? Possibly a very mild one, but overall, just a little bit slower than the frenetic rate we've had during the recovery. We ought to be thinking about a lot of things as we go forward. There's a change in globalization. A lot of that is driven by technology concerns by foreign governments, by U.S. governments, how that's going to affect geopolitics. And so we created an industrial policy in America for the first time. We're pouring lots of federal money into the chip industry, into the transition for energy. All of those things will impact all of us, and it will impact the tech industry. So when Brooks talked about last year's tech industry, we knew that North Carolina was doing better. We're growing as a state more than most states in the United States. Our population continues to grow. And tech, the knowledge part of our economy, continues to be a broader and broader part of what we're doing. The growth in the knowledge sector, the tech-driven knowledge sector in North Carolina is dramatic. We are becoming a state that is known for our technology. And when you look at the last 5 years, tech sector industry growth, even through the pandemic, has been very strong. Almost 290,000 workers today in technology industries in the state, about 25,000 jobs. If you look the last year, and as Brooks said, we'll release the new report in February. Last year was the strongest growth year in firms that we've had in the 9 years that we've done this. And North Carolina is one of the fastest growing states for technology industry employment, ranked 9th last year. We've been higher in the past, a little bit lower in the past, but again, one of those states that is seeing growth in the tech industry, and those industries are concentrating. Everybody in the country is not growing in technology, and so this is a key part of our state's economy. We divide the tech industry into 4 sectors every year: energy tech, environmental tech, and the 2 that are the largest in North Carolina, life sciences, which has grown through the pandemic at almost 10%, and IT, another real strong growth. So overall, broad-based, and you can see that North Carolina technology firms are growing rapidly. We are pretty diverse. Every year, we're near the top of women in technology. Last year, we were the 2nd-rated state in percentage. Maine was number 1, and the District of Columbia is always at the top. And Brooks insists every year I don't count that as a state. So number 2 last year. We'll see how we do this year. Our fingers are crossed to regain number 1, which we've had in the past. We also track tech jobs. So the industry, think IBM is an industry, but every job at IBM is not a tech job. Think Belk's department stores, not a tech place, but a lot of tech workers. And so what's happened more and more is the number of people involved in technology occupations has continued to grow. And in North Carolina, that number is approaching 400,000 jobs. So only 32% of the people who have tech jobs work in the tech industry. So each year we have to look at both of those. So now the metro comparison for this year, and it is nice to do this. When you look around the country, we all know that technology tends to concentrate in some metros. We created a set of indexes. The tech leadership of NC Tech helped us come up with the methodology. We use the same methodology each year, and we look at tech supply. Do you have the workers? The demand for those workers, tech demand, and we look at innovation. We look at the top 105 populated metros in America, and we add the other 5 North Carolina metros. So we only look at 110 of the close to 400 metros, but we do look at all the ones in North Carolina. This is the overall rankings this year. That's the busiest chart I'll show you, but I'll leave it up on the screen for a second to see where everybody falls. As you can see on the far left, Durham and Raleigh both score in the top 10. Charlotte's in the top 30. Wilmington right about 50th of this group. So North Carolina metros are scattered across the rankings. We're going to dive into them, but just when you look at the release today, you'll be able to find your favorite city in America. Some of the places that are doing well in everything. Salt Lake City is a good example. Provo, Utah, Austin, Texas. They do well in tech, but they also do well across all economic factors. Other places that are struggling economically are being given a life preserver by their tech industry. Think places like St. Louis or Chicago, where you read not great news about their overall economy, but yet their tech economy continues to do pretty well. If you look at the top 10 metros overall, this is the group today, and you can see that in the top 5 spaces, not much change. Durham stayed at number 6. Raleigh Cary Metro moved up from 8 to 7. And you see at the bottom, a few places broke into the top 10 for the first time this year. It's a little bit different bottom half of that top 10, but the top stayed the same. I mapped the top 20 for you so you can see how they are around the country. That's not one sector of our country, one region that is great for technology. There are cities, metro areas that are great for technology scattered all across the country. In the South, North Carolina, Georgia, and Texas are the only states that have leading metros, but otherwise scattered all over America. What happened in the top 100? One of the biggest changes this year. The biggest gainers are Knoxville, Tennessee, Portland, Maine, Wichita, Kansas, Miami, Colorado, Richmond. A pretty diverse crowd moving up, some of them pretty significantly. Biggest slides moving down this year: Birmingham, Alabama, Cleveland, Worcester, Mass. So there's a lot of movement on the chart, and that's with 21 factors. You expect there to be movement regularly. If you look at supply, so one of our 3 groupings, again, you see Raleigh Cary showing up there in the top. It is number 8 this year. I don't think the top group is typically a surprise. San Jose, Seattle, Boston, we all know are tech hubs. Madison continues to score really well. San Francisco, Austin. If you look at the top 100 and you see how North Carolina metros do, it's a scatter across the whole state. Charlotte, again, top 25. Wilmington has moved into the top 50 here. Some of our areas continue to be in the bottom half of this, but most of them are either stable or improving slightly. This is the 20 top metros for resident tech workers per 1,000. So again, you see in our part of the world, in the South, North Carolina, Georgia, and Texas. A lot of these areas are driven by the presence of their R1 research universities. They tend to attract a lot of the tech workers. So when you look around the country and you see Colorado Springs or you see Boise, you see Madison, Wisconsin, those are places where the research universities are having a big impact. And I'll show you that in a slide in a minute. Throughout the report, I encourage you to get it and look at it because I'm not going to go through, but it's parts of it today. We do a lot of metrics like this. So the number of tech workers per 1,000 adults. This tries to give you some idea of relative uh, density of the workers without having the largest cities. So if we took just the number of tech workers around the country, then New York and Los Angeles and Chicago would dominate some of those. But this gives you the concentrations, real strong concentrations in Raleigh and Durham and Charlotte around North Carolina, a little less in some of our other areas. The number of people with a bachelor's degree per 1,000 adults, you can see in Raleigh, Cary, and Durham, Chapel Hill, almost half the adults have a bachelor's degree. It's less in a lot of our metros in North Carolina, but Wilmington's up to 41% having a bachelor's degree, almost 40% in Asheville, Greenville at 33%. So large areas of well-educated or educational attainment in a lot of our metros. If you look at the 20 metros for computer, math, and science degrees around the country, very similar. So it's the places where those technical degrees show up. It's also the places that have the highest technology workforce. So the tie there, the relationship is very clear on these mathematics. And this is the amount of math and statistics degrees per 1,000. Raleigh Cary right at the top. That you can see that in their gaming industry and their software industry shows up among the types of companies that are there. Look at STEM education, new completers per 1,000 adults. The leader in North Carolina is Greenville. The STEM East program has been around for a while. They work really diligently to make sure that a lot of young people have exposure to STEM education. And so you see Greensboro is near the top of this. Other parts of the state really doing a good job of trying to get people with STEM degrees in their work labor force that should over time result in more technology spreading out around the state. If you look at profiles, online profiles with tech skills, pretty normal up there, what you would expect to see. We look at these online profiles to give us a different way of looking at the data. H-1B visas, if you look at their approvals, no doubt that Durham Chapel Hill way ahead of everybody else in the state, and they're using that H-1B visa program to drive their technology industries in those communities. You look at the diversity index, the most diverse tech workers in the state are in Asheville, Hickory, Winston-Salem. So different metros at the top of technology diversity here. And that's a good sign. In North Carolina, Brooks knows over the years with the NC STIR, getting more diversity into our tech workers has been one of the goals that comes out of the data. So working better in some parts of the state than in others. We continue to try to attract talent. DCI, a national firm, does a report every year called the Talent Wars. And cost of living and housing affordability and housing cost safety are at the top of those lists. We all know that many of these tech places around the country are pretty expensive. That includes the ones in North Carolina. Affordability for our communities is better than it is in some places, but we've seen the house prices raise pretty highly in the recent years. So it's something to keep an eye on. It's also something to expect that technology workers in the future, or even remote ones, are going to make choices that might spread technology broader than it currently is. That's good news for some metros, probably a warning sign for others. When we look at demand around the country, number one place last year for technology demand was Salt Lake City. So, Skylar, congratulations on being in the place where the highest demand for tech workers are. The rest of the group looks pretty normal. Portland, which has had a lot of economic struggles in recent years, still a very high demand for tech workers. Albuquerque, New Mexico, the federal labs are there, as they are in Colorado Springs. So those labs are also a big piece of this. In North Carolina, our rankings look pretty close to normal at the top, but then Fayetteville moves into the number 4 spot, Greenville there. So it's a mix of the other metros. I think it's fair to say that Raleigh, Cary, and Durham, Chapel Hill, the Charlotte area continue to be our tech major hubs, but other parts of the state are showing up in our rankings all across them. If you look at the density again of tech workers, see the list up here, how North Carolina metros do in this list. And they're not as high in some of the places, but part of that is the type of tech worker that we're looking for in those locations. Again, the postings are here. They haven't changed much over the years. The numbers of metros is the third year where we've done this. The unique job postings are still strong. So we're seeing nationally the bump that you got toward the end of the pandemic cooled down a little, but there's still high demand across the state for job postings in technology. And the median number of days that they stay up, if you're down at the bottom, you turn over pretty quickly. At the top, it's harder to find those workers. They tend to stay a little bit longer. So if we had a few more workers in Greenville and Wilmington and Winston-Salem, the job postings would probably slow down just a little. The cost of living adjusted median hourly wages remain very high. This is why we all covet the tech workers. If you're in the economic development field in the United States, the high wages result in high ripple effects through the economy. So the impact on additional jobs is even higher. If you look at job openings per 1,000 adults, you get Charlotte jumps into that number in the South. That's the first time you've seen them on that chart. The Bay Area is still strong, the DC area. And I haven't mentioned it, but throughout many of these charts, you see Nebraska and Iowa and Wisconsin, Michigan, Midwestern states that continue to have a lot of demand for technology workers. This annual tech job openings per 1,000 adults. You can see that there are still quite a few tech openings in the core metros in North Carolina. Those metros, we don't see any slowdown in our forecast. And the stronger the number of job openings, the turnover rate's been higher. So if you're looking for stability, some of our other metros are better at retaining their workforce, but opportunity has caused a lot of turnover in some of our metros. The last piece of this is innovation assets. And when we look at innovations, we're looking at patents and higher education, R&D, and those type of things around the country. Raleigh scores number 3, Durham, Chapel Hill number 4. So among the most innovative metros in America. In the state, there's a place, Winston-Salem, ranked 15th in America, moved up the charts. Greenville 38th, Wilmington 49th. So a lot of innovation assets. So we expect to see those areas continue to add technology jobs and industries over the next few years. Patents tend to be associated with the R1 universities and the technology larger companies. Raleigh and Durham and Chapel Hill up there, Winston-Salem 3rd, Hickory 4th. So again, a little bit of a mix at the top. Higher education R&D absolutely follows. So Durham, Chapel Hill, that's the presence of Duke and University of North Carolina. Wake Forest helps drive the Winston-Salem numbers, NC State, East Carolina. And then in the Greensboro High Point area, UNCG and A&T. So we're really seeing a reflection of the university assets in those communities. On the business side, you see Wilmington near the top, Greensboro near the top. Different sets of numbers where the individual businesses are there. Business-funded R&D, Research Triangle Park certainly drives a lot at the Durham Chapel Hill level. And then the SBIRs and STIRs to fund those. Durham Chapel Hill has always been the leader in this, but you see Winston-Salem, Greensboro, Wilmington all near the top of having those SBIR and STIR fundings for new innovation. Business application number, Charlotte leads the way, Greenville second. This is the dynamism in their communities, the overall applications. You can see a little bit of a different mix here. A lot of business activity in the state in the last few years. During the pandemic, there was record numbers of new business starts in North Carolina, and we see the activity continuing to be pretty brisk. if you look at that business dynamism, a little bit different mix around the country, Northwest Arkansas, Des Moines, Iowa, and there, Boise, Idaho. So around the country, new startups have scattered a lot. You see the big concentration in California. We like to talk a lot about the California economy not doing as well, and yet a lot of factors in the economy they do quite well. The dynamism rate in the state, Charlotte at the top of that number, as I said, Greenville, Winston-Salem, Asheville, also near the top. You see, in this case, Durham not doing as well. It's been at the top of a lot of our lists, but not as much new activity. That's the growth of existing companies and the larger institutions. They're soaking up most of the labor. So just in summary of this, there's been little change in the rankings over the last report. Durham, Chapel Hill, Raleigh, and Charlotte are still among the national leaders overall. The metros that are really strong in tech have done a good job of remaining strong, but we're seeing new pressure from places out in the Midwest. The federal government is pushing a lot of new money to broaden the metros that are strong in technology. The North Carolina legislature put some money this year in trying to help other places with their innovation indexes. So I would expect over time that there's going to be a broadening or dilution of tech cores, but North Carolina's positioned really well for that. And every year when we do the STIR, we look at the things that drive technology to states. North Carolina is still well positioned for that. Within the state, I think some of our other metros that have been in the middle of the pack over the last few years are going to get a little more growth because of affordability and because of focus on that. So I'll stop there, Brooke. Stop my sharing as soon as I can figure that out, and we will we'll move on to your panel or see if there are any questions that I can try to answer, or Skylar can answer them if he gets a hold of them.
Thank you, Ted. And I'll reiterate for those who joined after we began that I've got some connectivity issues that may kick me off, but I'll be right back on through my phone if I have to be. So bear with me if that happens. Two quick things to comment on. You had mentioned, Ted, a reference to STEM degree completion and how North Carolina does pretty well in that. It's worth noting for our audience, two things will help drive that even probably higher as time goes on. In the last budget cycle, I believe it was, or at least in that time frame, North Carolina accelerated the funding, front-loaded the funding to launch a program that would ensure there's at least one teacher in every public middle school and high school in North Carolina who's qualified to teach at least an introductory level of computer science. So to at least expose students to computer science at that stage, if they haven't already prior to middle school. That's just now sort of ramping up and will kick in. And then just in the last couple of weeks, the governor signed a bill that makes North Carolina the 8th state in the country to require a computer science course as part of your graduation requirement in high school. That kicks into gear next fall with the incoming 9th grade class. So there's a couple of ways that the state has ramped up funding and policy requirements that will expose a far greater swath of our student population to STEM in general, but computer science in particular.
Yeah, Brooks, congratulations on that. This morning I'm going to be doing a presentation to the Denver business community, state of Colorado's annual meeting, and that North Carolina movement on computer science is one of the things I'm going to mention as sort of a national leader, and it's a wonderful step forward for the state.
Another thing I wanted to observe, those who don't deal with this sort of stuff on a regular basis may be surprised to learn that when we talk about metros, that's actually a defined term with the federal government as to what makes up a metro, and people might be surprised to learn that the Triangle is not a metro. Raleigh, as you noted, Raleigh-Cary is a metro. Durham, Chapel Hill is a metro. It actually speaks to the strength of that broader region that both of them independently will show up on the top 10 list so often without being combined. So that's just an interesting note. I don't know if you want to comment about the whole metro thing.
Yeah, it's an ongoing debate around the country as to what is and isn't. My personal opinion is that the Triangle should be a common metro. It doesn't make any sense. Research Triangle Park is down the middle. Part of it is in one metro and part of it is in another. And for
Right.
me, that's enough to make it not very smart to do that. But around the country, they just redid metros just a month ago. And they made a lot of, they did not change much in North Carolina. There's a few changes, but not in the Raleigh-Durham area. The Fayetteville Metro had some changes in its county numbers. And so I think we're going to stay like this for a while, but I can tell you when people are looking back at the North Carolina, when we're doing help with businesses, they ask us to combine Raleigh and Durham. So we have to add all the numbers manually because people view it as a single metro, and that's true of most places. San Francisco, San Jose are different metros. If you're in the middle of the Bay Area, you think you're in one place, and you certainly have a labor pool that's one place, but
Yeah.
I'm not going to try to outguess the federal government.
We do have a question from the viewing audience, and I was going to mention this as you were talking, but I did not want to interrupt you. Every profession has its acronyms, and there are plenty in the economic development, economic analysis world. You had a slide about SBIR and I think one other grant program. Can you explain what those are? And the question that came through is, why doesn't Charlotte area do better in SBIR grants?
Yeah, I'm going to let Scott, or if you'd like to answer the specifics on SBIR and STIRs, it's a good time for you to jump in and get a little recognition for doing all this work. And I'll let you guess on Charlotte, and then I'll guess on Charlotte for you.
Okay. First, just SBIR is a small business program through the federal government. And oftentimes you apply through a federal agency to get grants for really innovative early stage investments from the government to help companies kind of get through the first, the federal government essentially works as an angel investor for high concept but early investments in innovation phases. So I think here we get the benefit of the R1 institutions again, because a lot of those early stage investments might be technology transfers from the university. So universities are developing technology and then they're spinning off into startups from that. That would be my guess for Charlotte, maybe lagging behind Raleigh and Durham in the space. And it could also just be that the awards that Charlotte gets maybe get slightly less funding. That could also be a component of it. What's your guess, Ted?
Yeah, I think that's all that is exactly correct. Charlotte, University of North Carolina at Charlotte is certainly on its way to adding a lot more research. People in North Carolina might not realize just how big Duke and the University of North Carolina are in federal grants. They're both over $1 billion a year in federal funding. NC State is not far behind that. So the power of those three, and R1 is a designation for the largest research universities in the country. Those three generate a huge amount of the economic activity that happens in the Research Triangle area, and they are unique in the country. There are very few places where there are multiple huge research monies from the federal government, and so I think that that's the answer for that that driving. And SBIRs and STIRs in North Carolina, the innovation group at the state really push those best they can. They're pushed through the small business technology centers, and I think they just, because of the universities, they're driven more into the triangle.
Thank you. All right. Well, we are at the end of our time, actually, for this portion of the program. Ted and Skylar, thank you very much for joining us today. We will be posting all of this on our website. I'll mention this at the end again, but nctech.org/research will take you to the page on our website where this report and other publications that we have throughout the year are updated. It's also where you will see in February that 2024 edition of the State of the Industry report that we referred to earlier. So, Ted and Skylar, thank you.
And we'll hang on for questions at the end. Thanks.
Okay. All right. All right. Well, now we're going to switch gears to our panel. If you're a panelist, if you'll come back on with your video and sound. And we'll be talking now about the impact of the tech sector on North Carolina, as well as what factors in North Carolina impact the tech sector. We have a great group of guests with representation from state government, local government, one of the states and countries and world's largest tech employers, and a North Carolina headquartered tech company focused on AI and machine learning. With us today are Tim Humphrey, Chief Analytics Officer of IBM, and also the Senior State Executive and RTP Site Lead for IBM. Nate Denny, who is Deputy Secretary of Broadband and Digital Equity with the North Carolina Department of Information Technology. Tom Rump, who is CEO of Measure.io, a North Carolina-based technology company. And Shanika Thomas. She is Chair of the Wake County Board of Commissioners. Welcome to all of you. All right, a reminder to our live audience to use the Q&A button to submit any questions for our panel. I see a lot of you have introduced yourselves in chat and encourage others of you to do the same. So we have a sense of who is listening today. So I'm going to actually start with Shanika Thomas. I'd like to start with you because you're a leading public official in one of North Carolina's strongest economic regions, as was evidenced by the report we just heard. What are your general impressions of the impact of the tech sector on local economies, not just the one you're in, but your sense of that broadly?
Thank you so much. I'm excited to be here. I think really when I think about the tech sector, there's mutuality between our community and the tech sector. We really help to cultivate an environment that's attractive to new and growing tech companies, right? And I think those companies have turned invested in our community. And that's where we really see partnership. When we can attract companies and they can invest in our community, it's really helpful to the region. And also, I think that the county has made really strategic and bold investments in education, right? From K-12 and the public schools and to Wake Tech, and Wake Tech collaborating with major industries. And then when we look at our colleges and universities, education really is a driving force behind innovation in the region. And so that's really important to us. And when you see education being a driving force, we also have made meaningful investments in infrastructure and in our greenways and the quality of life here. And so I believe, and our economic development folks have told us, that companies see Wake County and the Triangle as a whole as a really great place to live. And so we talk about that, and that leads to healthy consumer activity. We see job multiplier impacts. There are more jobs are created to support those companies and those employees. So people want to live here. That means tech companies want to come here. They pay higher wages, which helps with consumer activity. And it's just cyclical, right? We really believe that partnership and collaboration is what builds up everyone. And companies know that from the start. When we start talking to them about economic development grants, they know exactly what we're looking for here in the Triangle region. And that's a great quality of life for our citizens: public safety, parks, housing, libraries, all of those things. And so it makes a big difference, I think, to companies.
Thank you. In fact, you highlighted one of the data points that we track in that State of the Tech Industry report that I mentioned earlier, and that is in North Carolina, every tech job, the tech job multiplier is important. That every tech job results in 3.05, so just over 3 additional jobs in the economy. And the wage differential is also substantial. In fact, in North Carolina, tech workers account for about 6% of all workers, but 12% of all wages received. So it's clearly a driver of the economy anytime we can build up jobs in the tech sector. Thank you for that. I want to move on to you, Tim. IBM has long been one of the largest tech employers in the state, an anchor in RTP. Early on, drawing workers and their families to North Carolina, primarily from the Northeast, I imagine, and then being one of the larger hirers of local graduates and existing talent. But now you're not alone. How has the influx of tech employers impacted the job market, availability of talent, and the retention of talent for employers like IBM?
Yeah, it's a great question, Brooks. And, I get this question quite often, and people will say, oh, we just saw this announcement of this particular tech company. Does that bother you? Does it make you scared? And my answer is always, no, it doesn't. I think when you have an influx of companies coming to a region, Yeah, are you going to see some attrition? Absolutely. Are people going to go after some of your best and brightest? Sure. But I think that having several companies in the region, it's actually good. It fuels innovation, it fuels some competition. It makes you say, how can I make my place of work one of the most engaging places for employees? It makes you start to think outside the box on what your culture is and those things that'll make employees say, I want to be with your company. I am bought into the strategy. I like the culture. So I actually think it's a good thing. And yeah, are you going to see some attrition every now and then? Sure. But I would rather have more companies coming to a region, even if they're in the same industry, because like we said before, that increases the talent supply overall, and that makes people want to come here to study, go to school. Like Shanika was saying earlier, to have all these companies coming means you got to have a good quality of life. So there's got to be other things that people want to make people want to plan a family and have a life here, and all of that's really good. So yeah, I think the downside of losing some people here and there is generally outweighed by all the positives of having a thriving region and having a lot of companies come into the area.
This is North Carolina Tech Association's 30th year, and I just hit my 15th year mark. And one of the changes I've noticed is when I first started, I was talking to some recruiting firms, people who do that for a living, as well as some of the hirers of significant tech talent. And it was not uncommon at all for them to say to me, it was hard sometimes to persuade more senior tech workers to move to North Carolina for a job, A, because of preconceived notions, I suppose, about North Carolina, but secondly, a fear that if they came and it didn't work out or they were ready for the next thing, they'd have to move again because there were not necessarily, at least their perception was, great opportunity to remain in the area at the level that they came in at. And I've talked to those same recruiters and hires over time, and that's simply not the case anymore. You actually want a vibrant environment where when you want to bring people in who are at a more senior level, they're eager to come. They know that there's a good ecosystem here. If things don't work out or there's just not an opportunity to advance where they are, there are other opportunities in the area. And I think you're right that it benefits everybody. Sort of a rising tide lifts all boats.
Agree.
Thank you for that.
Agree 100%.
Okay, good. All right, Nate, I'm going to move to you now. North Carolina has been a leader in deployment of high-speed connectivity for many years, going back a lot further than a lot of people realize. And more recently, some transformational federal investments have prompted us to have a once-in-a-generation level of funding to support broadband expansion in particular. I think most people in highly populated areas of the state would be surprised at the gaps that still exist in availability and affordability of broadband access. Tell us what's on the state's agenda in partnership with these federal funds and initiatives.
Of course. Yeah. Brooks, thanks for having me today. Thanks for making the connection between these topics too, right? Because they're absolutely related. The ability to access a high-speed internet connection is central to every part of modern life, right? In terms of accessing an education, building the workforce that attracts innovative businesses, the ability to participate in healthcare systems across the state, whether you're in an urban or rural area, having that connection is absolutely critical. Governor Cooper targeted early on in the pandemic a major influx of federal funding, as you mentioned, to address the digital divide in North Carolina, and not just doing that by incentivizing additional deployment of high-speed internet infrastructure, although that's a really important piece. We also have to make sure that we are addressing the high costs of an internet subscription, that North Carolinians have the devices they need and the skills they need to really participate in the modern economy. As you say, the need is really broad across the state, and it's not just a rural problem, right? You have folks in Chairwoman Thomas's district that might have access to a connection but can't afford the service, or maybe they don't have a laptop or tablet at home. And so we want to make sure that North Carolina is doing broad-based investments that help every resident of our great state access the opportunities that we're creating here. So across North Carolina, we've got nearly 375,000 unserved locations. That means locations where you can't get what constitutes broadband service of 25 megabits per second download and 3 megabits per second upload speeds. We've got another 125,000 that are underserved. So maybe they've got some internet service, maybe it's fast sometimes, but it's not reliable. It's not the speeds you need to really have one or more parents working from home, kids learning from home, accessing telemedicine services, and so on. And so Governor Cooper has already allocated more than $1 billion of American Rescue Plan funding to help us start addressing this issue. We've awarded funding now across 92 of our counties to serve almost 150,000 households and businesses that don't have high-speed internet service currently. And of course, every one of those businesses that we connect, on top of the benefits of connecting homes, the businesses we can connect have a force multiplying impact in those rural communities and suburban and exurban communities as well. So we're running through those American Rescue Plan funds quickly. We've got about 40% of them allocated already. And we're also preparing for what's known as the BEAD program, or Broadband Equity Access and Deployment program. This is part of President Biden's bipartisan infrastructure law. I think Ted mentioned earlier the presence of a real industrial policy and a number of funding opportunities that North Carolina is benefiting from, including the CHIPS Act, that will help us build a more innovative sector here. The bipartisan infrastructure law is bringing more than $1.5 billion to North Carolina to keep connecting those households. So we're really going to have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to make sure every North Carolinian has that connection and, like I said, can afford the service and get the devices and skills they need to really continue attracting new companies, right, and continue creating opportunity.
Well, I think another factor too is that in the hybrid or virtual world that we now live in, which is certainly a permanent shift to some degree from pre-COVID, people can live where they want to and work for who they want to. And so that becomes even more important to provide high quality and reliable broadband wherever one might be, so that they can do the work that they want to be able to do without necessarily living in a highly populated area or that has lots of options for high-speed connectivity. So thank you, Nate, for that.
Of course.
Tom, let's move to you. I'm sure it wouldn't surprise you to hear that while there are lots of great large employers in North Carolina, the vast majority of companies here are small and medium-sized businesses, and a majority of employed North Carolinians work for them. What makes North Carolina, and in your case, what makes North Carolina so appealing to executives like you to start and grow their tech businesses?
Well, Brooks, thanks for having me. Nate, I love that expression, the internet's fast sometimes. So, I appreciate that. What's great for us about North Carolina, and a couple of people have mentioned this, is the availability of talent, and then also the quality of life, especially so if you are working from home, quality of life is really, really important. So that those two combinations has really been helpful. But I'll tell you what I really wanted to focus on, and this is a perfect example of what we're doing today. Brooks, you and I have known each other since the beginning, I think, and we've worked with Tracy, whether it's being involved in the network or whether it's being involved in the NC Tech Awards, because that's the kind, if you're a 5 or 10 or 15 person company, you need to punch above your weight, so to speak. And if you are able to come to the NC Tech Awards and be on the stage, you get an awful lot of people who'd say, oh, you're Measure IO. We saw you at the NC Tech Awards, and it gives you access to the broader network. So I wanted to make that call out, but also a couple others. So we've been working with Jay Bigelow and CED from the beginning as well. He's really helped us. In fact, he introduced us into Techstars, which we're a graduate of Techstars. So that's the kind of network where when we're fundraising, Jay would say, hey, here's a couple of people you should talk to. And every once in a while, he's done kind of a deck review with us and said, I wouldn't say it that way if I were you, which is kind of advice that you really need when you're coming through the process. Last two other things. In addition, because Wilmington is showing up on the charts more and more, so we've been actively engaged with the Whale Angel Network, Jim Roberts and that team. We have a series of investors actually out of that area, which is really exciting. And then lastly, the North Carolina Chamber has been helpful as well. When COVID started, because we're an auto machine learning AI platform, we actually were able to help when, if you recall, early in 2020, all the data that was being published may or may not have been accurate. So we were able to work with the chamber to be able to say, here's information that would be helpful. And actually it's true. So the reason I bring up the network piece is that's what's really been important for us. So you've got a talent base, you've got quality of life, but you have a group of people and organizations who want to help you be successful. And that's what makes all the difference if you're really trying to take one or two people to 5 to 10 to 15 to 25, you need that kind of support because you don't have the reach of some of the larger companies who say, oh yeah, we have a whole team that does that. Well, we don't have those teams, but we're able to lean on the resource that Brooks, you and your team and CED and the Whale Angel Network provide.
Thank you, Tom. Appreciate that. I'm going to open these next questions up to whoever would like to jump in on the panel. I wanted to give each of you a chance to address a particular angle first, but we touched a little bit on the educational strength, particularly during Ted Abernathy's presentation in North Carolina. So what is your impression from your vantage point of the role of the educational systems at all levels in supporting the continued strength of the tech ecosystem, both in terms of talent production and things like tech transfer from higher education institutions to the private sector, apprenticeship and intern partnerships, things like that? You might want to take a stab at that.
I could take that one, Brooke.
Sure.
It's been really helpful for us because we've Mike Prorok, our founder CTO, is an NC State grad, so we've been able to tap into resources there. We're working on a project with NSF on food and water security. There's a small group inside of Duke that offers consultative services as part of their curriculum to companies like ours to help move the business forward. So the access to talent like that, the access to programs that can move our business forward has been really helpful.
Tim, you lead a company that I'm sure depends heavily on internships and partnerships with educational institutions and systems. And for our audience, I think it's important to note that there's the K-12 systems, of course, but the community college system is one of the largest and most successful in the country. Of course, the public university system, the same. And North Carolina has 36 private colleges, in what they call independent colleges and universities, many of which are small liberal arts institutions, but that also have computer science programs, increasingly cyber programs, and so forth. And they educate a disproportionately large percentage of teachers who come out and teach in North Carolina. So there's really an amazing 100 plus institution higher education network in North Carolina. So Tim, what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think that's a huge advantage for us. And one of the things that I always have to make a little bit of fun of is I'll often be with my peers and I'll hear things like the war for talent. And I say, well, it's not really much of a war, right? Because if you think of a war, it's fought on many different battlegrounds, not just one. And I think as employers need to not just go to the same school or the same area for talent, right? We have a lot of talent. We're just not looking for it in the right places. So you mentioned things like some of the smaller institutions. Look, I'm a graduate of NC State, go Pack. I'm also a trustee for NC State. It produces a lot of great talent, but I think that doesn't mean that's the only source for talent. The community colleges here have been fantastic in producing talent, but also in partnering with industry, right? And I think that's what really can help create a thriving region. I'll use the example of Back in the day when blockchain first came out, we were struggling to find blockchain talent. People that, had enough base of knowledge on blockchain so that we could teach them the rest. It would be difficult to have a degree in blockchain set up. That would take time. There's lots of, things you have to go through to get degree programs set up. We were able to work in like a couple of months with the community colleges and take some of our talented engineers to go help teach courses in the community colleges so that we could have access to talent that had enough base of knowledge in months versus waiting years. That's a powerful story. And that sort of speaks to what you're saying, Brooks, is we have access to a lot of talent. We have access to flexible programs that can produce the type of academic success that we need from the large institutions as well as community colleges and smaller universities that are willing to work with industry on what we need in the fast changing needs of the technology industry.
Yes, the nimbleness of the community college system is certainly one of their strengths. You need to be able to move in real time. Shanika, were you going to say something?
I wanted to jump in here. So to Tim's point about talent and opportunities for talent in this region, I don't want us to ever forget about our HBCUs. I know Tim is a graduate of NC State. I am a graduate of HBCU, Fayetteville State University. I attended Howard University. We've got A&T State University here. I was at an electronics company just yesterday talking about a huge new lab that they're doing there. And so when we talk about talent, diversifying talent, companies that want to diversify their workforce, we really want to make sure that we're including Wake Tech, of course, our community college, looking at some of the, technical skills that we could get out of our 2+2 programs with our high schoolers, right? Wake County is really, really big on our education system. I mean, we're growing local talent from early childhood education to our high schools to Wake Tech. And I just don't ever want folks to really forget about that. I mean, Wake Tech is expanding their Wake Works apprenticeship program that they do with us. And, every year they're having new programs that are really trying to fill the workforce demands of technology companies and how fast things are moving. I mean, I think this year they're going to add, biopharmaceutical technology and electroneural diagnostic technology. Say those fast, 3 times. And people don't even really understand how fast the industry is moving. But our colleges, universities, private and public, and our community colleges are really trying to keep up with the workforce demands and doing an excellent job.
Well, while I have your attention, let me ask you a question that came from the audience on a previous discussion, Shanika, and that is when Nate Denny earlier was talking about X number of unserved areas, literally not just underserved, but where there's not availability of high-speed connectivity or broadband connectivity, and many more that are underserved, or it's, in general, the population has a hard time affording it. A lot of people are surprised at how many rural areas there are in urban counties. Wake County has a lot of area, the land area that's not highly populated. Are there areas in Wake County, and Nate, maybe you speak to this as well because you know about all the counties, that do have pockets of either or both the lack of availability of service or the affordability issue being very important?
I'm totally smiling because Nate and I have literally worked together for the last year. I served with the North Carolina Association for County Commissioners on the President's Initiative last year was connecting counties. It was all about broadband access across North Carolina. And I served on that task force. So I got to work with Nate and his colleagues about specifically Wake County. When we look at the eastern part of Wake County, the Knightdale, Zebulon, Rollsville, Wendell, specifically, we have a lot of connectivity, lack of connectivity in those areas. And NCDIT is working really hard with us on BEAD grants and different things so that we can get connectivity all over the county. To your point, Brooks, I think people think often that because we are a large urban, we're the capital county, that we have everything, right? Everything works great here. We've got all the money, everything's moving wonderfully. And while that is the case in a lot of, situations, when it comes to broadband and tech access, that is not the case. And it's not just the eastern part. We've got spots in Fuquay and Holly Springs in the southern part personally, I am right off of Falls and 540, and I cannot take a conversation in my car. I literally drop a call every single time I cross 540 and Falls of the Neuse. And so it is a challenge, but we are working on it because we understand how important broadband access is to our residents, from telehealth to education. Tom talked about some of those things earlier. So we're working on it. Nate and I have worked together for the last year.
Yeah, and Brooks, if I can chime in on that, we show about 1,800 unserved locations across Wake County, right? And Chairwoman Thomas already mentioned kind of where you find those, right? The further you go east, particularly northeast, and then of course southwest in the county, you see big pockets of both unserved and underserved locations that are still lacking that technology. But we've already awarded grants to a number of providers to address a big chunk of that need. And with the additional bipartisan infrastructure law funding that's coming, we're really going to be able to tackle the rest. So I think a critical angle for the state is its strong partnerships with private sector companies, with county governments, with internet providers across the state. I think one of the key things that is central to Governor Cooper's plan is enabling county governments in particular to have more of a seat at the table when we're making those public investments. So we're not just going where internet providers want to go, we're empowering local officials who understand need in their community to have a seat at the negotiating table and help direct those outcomes for their constituents.
I'd just like to add in here to reemphasize Shanika and Nate's point. I serve on the Wake County Boys and Girls Club's board of directors. And during the pandemic, we had several students, youth, and also family members that didn't have high-speed internet. So they would actually come to our clubs to actually be able to access the internet with some type of reliability. And most of it was right here in Eastern Wake County, right around New Bern Avenue, Raleigh Boulevard area. Luckily, we had a good partnership with AT&T and our good friend Trey Rabin over there. And they have, they saw that need and have committed to helping us with improving our connection. They brought high-speed fiber there. The governor was part of the sort of ribbon cutting for creating a new lab where we could have access for faster and newer computers. But I share that story because, right here in Raleigh, not even extended, out to other parts of the county, right here in Raleigh, yeah, we do have areas where we do have populations that have huge needs. And we have young people that don't have the same advantages as other young people in other parts of the county. So it is real, when people talk about it and they try to think a little bit that, Raleigh's doing so well, we don't have these problems, but we do. And thankfully, we have elected officials like Shanika and other people like Nate that are working on this problem for us.
Yes, indeed. So let me ask a related question with a different angle to it. I'm curious here about input from you on from both the governmental and private sector folks on this panel on how the tech industry can address issues related to the digital divide. You touched on that, Tim, just now as an example with a nonprofit, the Boys and Girls Club, a partner like AT&T. But what measures are being taken to promote inclusivity and digital literacy that are really initiated by or supported by industry, private sector? Nate, you might actually know a lot more about that than certainly me, because there's so many companies involved in what you're doing. What are you seeing out there?
Well, there's really a huge range of ways that North Carolina's technology sector is helping to address this problem, right? Obviously, you have the internet providers who are connecting actual homes and who are stepping up to kind of meet this moment in terms of public investment. But you've also got a huge number of companies trying to help on the affordability side, helping to get people the devices they need and helping build digital skills. you've got, Brooks, as you know, among your members, computer refurbishing entities, one of which that's headquartered here in the Triangle, that helps receive donated laptops and tablets, refurbish them, and get them out to low-income members of the community. And they do that with volunteers that are gaining important skills, right? There's Cramden here, I think in Durham, that does a lot of that work. We've gone and volunteered and taken apart computers and put them back together. Fortunately, they still work even after I got my hands on them, and make sure that those devices are ready to get out to families that need them. In Charlotte, you've got one called E2D that does very similar work and recruits high school students, trains them how to work on the computer, and build critical skills that are extremely attractive to employers like Tim, right, and to the state of North Carolina. And so you've got a number of those, and they're getting those donations too from companies in the Triangle that are maybe cycling out old equipment. That's a really important element here. I also think the affordability angle is a really critical one, and this is something that I'd say all of the members of NC Tech can help with, and this audience generally, and that's helping folks know about how to access the Affordable Connectivity Program, which is a $30 a month subsidy for low-income North Carolinians that to help address the costs of a high-speed internet subscription. Getting the word out about this program and about how folks can check their own eligibility and whether their internet provider is participating is all hugely helpful to the state and to the people across North Carolina. And the easiest way to check on that is to go to getinternet.gov. You can check your own eligibility, see if your provider is participating, and then navigate that sign-up process. But all of these, I think, particularly on the adoption side, these tactics we're taking to try and get people the skills and devices they need are hugely important for building the kind of workforce we need to keep North Carolina's, particularly its metro areas, very competitive, and to build competitiveness in our rural parts of the state that are hurting, that aren't showing up in your report here. I know that for the state of North Carolina, the Department of Information Technology that houses the broadband mission here, getting those tech workers is increasingly hard, especially when we're trying to compete with Tim to hire. We can't pay as much as Tim can pay, right? And so we're leaning on everybody contributing, everybody trying to help get this mission accomplished, and additionally build that talented workforce we need.
Brooks, I'm going to jump in right here. Since Nate was talking about Tim, I think at the county, similarly, right, we are a large employer in this region, and we want to make sure that folks understand that county government is the place to be. It's a great opportunity for a career. And so to that end, Team Wake is looking for a digital inclusion consulting firm. We're working on a digital inclusion plan. We want to really use that firm to help with our digital equity planning, community engagement, and outreach. Wake County was ranked by the the National Association of County Officials as one of the top 10 counties over 1 million people in the Digital County Survey, right? And so that means that we have the need and the desire, the want to really ramp up our digital fluency in this region. And we really are excited about, the growing population of seniors that we have. And so to be able to do a digital inclusion plan in the county and make sure that our senior population gets some digital fluency and some learning there, really working on digital equity is a priority of ours. We've talked to our lobbyists, both federal and state, about if there are dollars to help with any of those kinds of programs, that we want to be included in that work as well. But again, as both an employer, Wake County as an employer, and Wake County as a government entity serving the public, we want to make sure that all of our residents, have digital fluency. So.
Right, thank you.
Yeah,
Tom, I'm going to pivot to you for this to start for this last question. I think it'll be, or next to last. Governments and employers.
I'd like to add just one thing to finish off that topic.
Sure.
If you mind. No, we're not in a position to have a lot of resources to extend broad reach. But what we do is, coming from Techstars, one of the mottos is give first. So what we're able to do from time to time is we held a class at Wake Forest University for folks who are working on auto machine learning and AI. More so to say, okay, you're in the classroom, here's what you're working on. It's technology, whether it's blockchain or whether it's large language models. But more importantly, we were able to say, oh, by the way, here's a use case, and here's how we're taking this technology to a company and how they're using it for to solve their business problems. So we're trying to connect some of the fluency at the university level into application. We also do that on the entrepreneurial side. I was on a panel at the loading dock where there's a group of entrepreneurs who are earlier stage than we are, and to say, hey, here's some things we tried that worked. Here's more importantly, here's some things we tried that didn't work. You may not want to do that, and to try to help accelerate their progress through sharing and networking.
Excellent. That's great. Well, where I was headed as a topic we touched on earlier was the fact that certainly post pandemic and with the expansion, ever growing expansion of broadband access, people can increasingly live where they want to, and either find an employer there or find an employer who they can work for, regardless of where they live. So I'm curious from all of your perspectives, both governments and private sector employers, about the evolution and how employees choose who to work for and where they want to work. Knowledge workers can pretty much be anywhere in many cases. This can impact demographic shifts. So that's important to counties as they plan. There's not necessarily the draw to be in a highly populated area just in order to get a job or to have those opportunities. So I'm curious from all of your perspectives, statewide, local, your own company, the county as an example, your general thoughts about that and what we're seeing and might see, if you can look at down the road 5 or 10 years, on how all this will impact all those factors I just mentioned. Who wants to jump in?
I have a couple of use cases if you would like.
Yeah.
What we found through the pandemic is, and most of our employees are software engineers. When they're trying to decide who they want to work with, I worked for IBM for years, Tim, by the way. For some people, big companies aren't the thing. So for some people, going to the office 3-5 days is not the thing. A lot of our people would prefer not to go to an office. So what we found is that they want to have flexibility on their schedule. They may have childcare, they may have carpool, etc. They also want to have fewer meetings, which we're finding more and more, because there's another switch that said people are finding they're less productive because they're not having as many meetings. So our team, we do stand-ups, but we're not having a lot of meetings. But what we find with broadband and the tools we have is people actually would prefer to work remotely, and they would prefer to have the flexibility of their schedule to look after their children, etc. And they would choose to live in they may not want to live in a downtown area. They may want to live more suburban or remote. So it's given them the flexibility to do that. And where we are, we can say, yeah, here's what you need to do. If you get it all done and you're connected to the team, that's perfectly fine. So we're finding that most people prefer the choice of what they would like to do is probably the best way to describe it.
I'll jump in. I think we have a very large employee base. So we see, for what we've seen, it's been mixed. There are pockets of our employee base, especially some of those that are very senior, plus 20 years of experience with the company, that feel very comfortable being able to get everything they need to get done and can do it anywhere. The flip side of that is we have a lot of early professionals that really seek that camaraderie that you get with people that you meet early in your career, that also love that sort of learning that happens naturally when you're together. I go back on my experiences. I don't know where I'd be if I wasn't around all of those smart, real senior engineers in the lab early on in my career and accelerated my engineering learning and knowledge. So we have folks like those, and then we have people, sort of in the middle where they appreciate some time in the office with the teams, building relationships, but also need some time for things like family commitments, medical commitments, and things of that nature. So, we try to make sure we have flexibility in how you work. Of course, not all jobs have the same amount of flexibility. If you're answering customer calls, right, you don't have as much flexibility, but for a lot of knowledge workers, that might not be the case. And we try to give you as much flexibility as possible. We do encourage coming into the office a few days a week because we feel like it is much easier to build relationships. I always say a company is more than their technology or their products or their offerings or their services. Most company are their people. And if people aren't connected to other people there, then, I think there's chance for higher attrition, lower engagement. So I personally tend to lean towards liking to see people building relationships and being around their coworkers, but I understand that times have changed as well. So, we try to provide that flexibility, but while at the same time encouraging people to, get to know their fellow employees and accelerate the learning, and for the more senior people to pass that knowledge on to the more junior people.
I love that, Tim. I really do. I think that it's really interesting that we are looking at a multi-generational workforce that has a larger spread than ever before. And so that's the different work opportunities and options are valuable in different ways to different folks, right? I think everybody, even when they work from home, they still crave community, togetherness, mentorship, that kind of thing. And so it's really important that we offer that and that tech companies offer that. I think at Wake County, our county manager has implemented, and the staff came up with something we call Wake 2.0. And it allows the individual departments, to your point, Tim, about what departments need. So the individual departments can tailor their in-person and remote schedules to fit the work and the workers, right? So that they have options. And that has really helped us with talent recruitment. And it's really landed us some talented folks whose previous employers really didn't want to change the way they were working. And so that's been super helpful. The other thing for Wake County is that we have partnered with Wake Tech. And we're doing a program there called Wake Invest in Women. And it's Dr. Casey Ashton is doing that. And so we're really looking at pay equity. Women of color in STEM professions have not traditionally made the same amount as their counterparts. And as we look at North Carolina, when we talked earlier, we were talking about how high we are in the tech workforce and how well we're doing. But we want to make sure that pay equity is there. And so that's an opportunity for tech companies as well to really attract talent, is looking at pay equity and compression studies and all of those things. And we did a compression study as well. The last thing I wanted to add also is, Tom talked a lot about artificial intelligence. And I really think that that's going to be an integral part of how we work. It's moving so fast. I serve on a national policy work group for artificial intelligence policy with 16 other county officials from across the country. And we just spent some time out in San Diego. And we're really wanting to put the message out, and I think it's important to put the message out, that artificial intelligence is not going to take jobs away. It's really helping production in the workforce. And that's really what we want employees, potential employees, and employers to look at and understand. And so I think as we talk about technology and we talk about how it's changing the work environment, we really want to look at what artificial intelligence can do and have some safeguards around that, some guardrails, but also look at how much production we're going to be able to get from workers using artificial intelligence. So artificial intelligence, pay equity, and like Tim said, that togetherness and community mentorship opportunities and hybrid, I think, are all things that tech employers really are going to have to consider. And those are things we're considering in county government. Because again, we're competing with the Tim Humphreys of the world, for workforce. And so we want to also be, competitive and seen as that great employer.
Tim, I'll pick up on what you said, Tim, earlier, to sort of tie a bow on this. Early in COVID, we did some polling of leaders in the tech sector in North Carolina, sort of rapid fire. I believe we did it twice a month or once a month for a little while early on. That has morphed into now what is a quarterly business sentiment poll that we do. And it gets a good bit of attention in terms of, what are companies doing in terms of hiring right now? What is their attitude about the upcoming quarter in terms of growth, or holding their own or declining? And that's been very interesting. But early on in COVID, we asked some open-ended questions. What's your biggest worry right now? Because it was a very uncertain time. We're talking about spring and summer of 2020. And one of the open-ended questions, as I say, was what worries you, concerns you. For a long time, well into COVID, one of the top answers in this open answer question, so it always appeared on the slide, top 10 phrases, was the challenge. The way it was phrased oftentimes was, it's one thing to nurture a relationship that you already have through this sort of medium, but developing new relationships, making new connections is very difficult to do. Now, people have done remote sales for years. That's not a new thing, but not anywhere near to the degree we do now, this virtual connect point. And so it was a real worry on the part of, primarily account execs or people who are involved in external client development. They were really noticing that the chance encounters, the conversations that happen live and in person that are impromptu and unscheduled, really just weren't happening. And it really hampered the development of camaraderie, the onboarding of new employees, and the attraction of new clients. So it just takes a whole new discipline, a whole new approach in the world that we're in today. Well, listen, we are at the end of our time. I want to thank our panel so much for making time to be with us. You all have amazingly important jobs, and you've given us a good chunk of your time. Thanks to those of you who have watched live. We'll be sending a link to this recording to all of those who registered in advance, and posting on the NC Tech YouTube channel and on our social channels. A reminder to visit nctech.org/research, where you'll find the Tech Innovation Index that we briefed you on at the beginning of this program, and other resources produced by NC Tech. So with that, thank you and have a great day, everyone.